Good evening. Here is a dark thought for you, and an explanation of what it is to be truly progressive. A true progressive is concerned not just with the middle class, but with the poor. We have a society that is deeply neurotic, and the best you hear and the most electable people are talking about enhancing the middle class. No one even dares to approach handling and correcting the poverty that exists in our country. Very little concern is given to that. Johnson was the last president, I think, that addressed that issue in a forthright manner. And he didn't get a lot of cooperation, and he predicted that the Democratic Party would lose support from the southern states for decades. You remember, the southern states were the former slave states that he was referring to. And how we treat others is also mirrored in how we treat our children. How you view poverty and how you treat the poor very likely enters into how you approach politics and other people and your children. This approach that is negative, that I'm referring to, is a punitive one that doesn't see deeply into the heart of either poverty or the hearts of children. What does it mean to look into that heart? It means to understand a lot more about human nature than what we typically pronounce, even from our schools. There's a kind of learned helplessness around needs and feelings and their expression. Even the need to be a little selfish when we're children. To not be schooled and educated as to how we should behave. Better than that is to love a child completely and as they are. This is the best thing for their growth and for their development and for them to grow into a more feeling, caring human being. The same thing goes with the poor. You need to love them where they are and understand where they are and quit thinking them somehow less than human. You know, as people who failed the test of entering into the middle class. Yeah. So when you hear people talking about expanding the middle class, you need to wonder, well, how do you feel about the poor? Do you forget about them because it's a difficult question? Well, that probably also means that you must ask the unforgivable question of how much do you really love your children? We love them to be what we want them to be, but do we love them as they are? Completely. So that they can grow into being perhaps better human beings than we are. That's the question. And also we're looking at how all of this affects education. All the praise that goes to the one that is the smartest, we are losing something in all of this. And what we're losing is the almost, what people would say, godlike love. Total love, no matter what. And so what we need to think about is love of learning. If you're approaching the heart of a child, you're approaching their motivations. Once those are going in the right direction, you don't have to school them quite so much. You don't have to give them heart attacks, with tests that will show whether they are smart enough. What does smart enough mean? Smart enough to be respected. Smart enough to have your needs met. Smart enough to be someone who would be in the middle class, perhaps. And all the concern for which is what is common practice and statement in the parlance of politics today. It's always about the middle class, isn't it? Or it's about, giving everything to the rich, because after all, it's not just the middle class who are better, it's the super wealthy who are better even than the middle class. We have to question this kind of valuing of human beings, or I should say, this kind of devaluing of human beings. This needs to be corrected. This is the connection that you need to pay attention to. Now, the question in the Democratic Party is, do we elect those who still proclaim this idea of the middle class are our main concern? Or do we go with those who are more truly progressive, but perhaps much less electable in this neurotic society? The people who actually care about the poor. These are two valid questions. The poor are less apt to vote, everybody knows. And if they do, they are being herded to the polls by others who still support mainly the middle class, which doesn't particularly inspire the poor, because in their heart they know they're not being included. Oh, then you bang on their doors and you call them on the phone and you say, we need you to vote. And their answer is sometimes, why should I? What should I bother? You have no concern for me. So, the other thing that we tend to devalue in this valuation system of typical politics, we may tip our hat to it, but nobody gets down to the real nitty-gritty. And the real nitty-gritty is that you're thinking that someone should make billions of dollars with their feet up in the air, relaxing and having a martini or something, while your people who sacrifice the most for the real welfare of the nation and the world, your farmers, your police, your firefighters, your garbage collectors, the most dangerous job there is, the people who build your bridges, perhaps even more dangerous. So, why do they get paid so little? Our veterans, for crying out loud. Even they. So why did all of these people get shoved under the bus? But they are approached. They are some of the poorer people who are approached in politics. I always like to stand, have their candidates stand by a flag and a veteran. Well, what have they done for them? They speak to the police, but what have they done to raise their wages? Garbage collectors, of course, well, nobody cares. How does this go into how we deal with our kids? Well, punishment attitudes. The only thing you get out of punishments is a better human doing. You don't get a better human being. Whatever happened to this idea in Christianity of the amazing grace? Very few of us feel like it's our duty to express it ourselves. And maybe that's part of the problem with religion. With religion, you have a God who supposedly does it all, that alleviates that necessity for us to do it. We have to think about that. Are we ever going to be totally progressive in that sense of agape love? Maybe not. But as President Kennedy once said, in this world, God's work is surely our own. This is only a near quote. I can't remember the exact one. But essentially, that's what he said. It is our job. He said one thing that was puzzling, which was that don't ask what the country can do for you, ask for what you can do for the country. Well, that has its value. But remember, the country is us. That means the country should be doing some things as a whole that actually lift people up and help people. Our prisons are growing at an alarming rate. We've turned it into a business. Gee, that couldn't go wrong, could it? We have more people in prison now than China. Think about it. And it's always seems to be about picking on the poor, who are disproportionately represented by minorities, a problem we still have. We need to take a look at all of these things, and we need to start lifting ourselves up. Yes, we should think what we can do for all of us, our country, but we should also be demanding that all of us, represented by the government, does for the betterment of all of us. And that includes the poor, and the garbage collectors, and more than just mouthings, support for the firefighters and the police and the veterans and the first responders of all ilks. Yeah, that's a negative word, ilks. Well, why did that spring to my mind? Because actually, people don't view these great servants of our country in a totally positive light. It wears off on all of us. So we have to perhaps police the mind a little as grown-ups. But not so much police, because that's just being a better human doing. What's really hard is to reach down inside and find that agape love, that love of all human beings, despite what they've done, despite who they are, despite what they're doing. I think the death penalty is a very pompous kind of thing for people to be doing. And even in terms of punishment, sometimes they've killed innocent people. And we know this. It's time for this punishing attitude to stop. It's time for us to rise up and really have concern for the poor. And that means getting us, the government, to jump in and help. Feeding people at Christmas doesn't feed them all year long. Food drives. Exhausting, right? Why not change the laws so that you don't have gerrymandering and which feeds the rich? You don't have gentrification, which drives the poor out of housing that they desperately need. Till we start to do unto others as we would have them do unto us, but more than this, do unto the least of us as if it were us. And in essence, they are. So that's my message for this evening. May the light and the universe that lives in your heart, its beauty and its promise, live long and do well. And that part of me, which is that, with this one action, honors that in you. Namaste.